Pat, welcome to the show, man.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it. Happy to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited to dive in and hear more about your journey. Obviously, I've done the research, but it's always good once you get to sit down with the person and hear really how they were able to build what they've built. And obviously, you have such a name in podcasting, right? It's synonymous. So it was like you and John Lee Dumas, right? Going back to back of like, who are these guys? They popped up out of nowhere doing massive things. And you've been able to kind of grow your business into so many different arenas, including something you just told me that I didn't know about, which is Pokemon YouTube channel, which is leading
Yes.
to live events and wild stuff. But why don't we take a second right now and you tell us, who is Pat Flynn today, and then we'll break down how you got there.
Yeah, Pat Flynn today is, I like to say, I'm a master of fun. Pat of all trades, master of fun, right? Because I have so many things that I have my hand in, but I don't have them all in my hand at the same time. I've built these things slowly over time. I've been able to automate a lot of the stuff so that I can get time back to spend time with family and build new things. And that's kind of who I am. I like to experiment and try new things. Right now, I'm a father of two and a husband here in San Diego, and I own multiple companies. I advise several companies in the startup space, including ConvertKit and Circle and several others. And I just love to tell story and share the journey, right? And that's kind of where this all started back in 2008. I actually got laid off from my architecture job. Thought I was going to be an architect for the rest of my life, and then I got let go during the recession. And I started an online business helping people pass an architectural exam, a very specific exam that's like a niche and a niche and a niche about sustainable buildings, essentially. And there was no information about that online. So I put that information online. And very shortly, I started to get ranked in Google, started to be mentioned in different forums. And all of a sudden, I'm this like expert on this topic when really I wasn't. I was just the person to organize that information and put it in one place, which was of value to people. And then a few months later, I launched an ebook, just a PDF file that I sold through a PayPal situation where like PayPal gives you a button. And I was just like, well, I'll put that button on my website. And again, not even really knowing what I was doing. And then in that first month after launching that study guide, I had generated $7,908.55. And it was
Wow.
life-changing because that was 2.5 times more than I was making as an architect with 5 years of schooling and all that stuff behind it. It didn't feel real, right? Like, and I thought the FBI was like gonna swat me like at any moment because it just like, it felt like wrong to have it happen that way. It wasn't easy. I put a lot of work into it, but it happened fairly quickly. And then the income continued to grow and continued to grow. And this is when people were like, how are you doing this? Like, this is amazing. And I said, well, I can just show you. Let me build another website and just talk about it. And no plans to ever make money from that website. It was just like a journal essentially of what was going right, what was going wrong. And I even shared, and this is the first thing that put me on the map on this new website, which was called smartpassiveincome.com, was I started to share my income reports. That was, okay, in October of 2008, I sold this many products at this price. Here's how much PayPal took, and here's how much I spent to get there. And here are the things that I wish I'd done differently, et cetera. And people loved that. They were just like glued to it every single month. I was planning on doing it only once, but I saw the response to it and I was like, wow, people don't get this transparency elsewhere. Like that's strange, because it just made sense for me to do that, because
Yeah.
if people were going to learn from me, I wanted to show like what was happening. And in my research, I found that so many people were talking about how they were building businesses and how they were making money, but then they were like, if you want to know how I'm doing it for real, like you got to pay this money. It's behind this paywall, right? And I was like, no, like here it is. Like here it is. And I think that's what brought me onto a lot of other podcasts as a guest back then, what helped people link to me for. And then eventually I started a podcast in 2010 myself that really catapulted the brand, because I was, I was able to tell a good story and bring other success stories on of people building things from scratch, and people really loved the style. And now, 13 years later, the podcast has been up 80 million downloads.
Wow.
It's provided so much opportunity, but most of all, it's been a great way to just make a connection to the audience. And this as a podcaster as well. It's just like such a great way to scale intimacy with a group of people. And of course, I have a YouTube channel in the entrepreneurial space as well. It's just Pat Flynn. I've written books. I've spoken on stages. And then more recently, I've been diving into a lot of just kind of bigger experiments, not just like little websites here and there, which I have done in the past. I've shared like in 2010, when Smart Passive Income was up and running and doing well, I was like, hey guys, I'm going to build a website from scratch in a topic I know nothing about, just to kind of show you what I would do and how it works. And in 73 days, I got this website about security guard training to be #1 in Google.
Oh my
And
God.
it started making money. And I was like, wow, this is cool. Hey, everybody, look. And of course, everybody could see that it was there. They would search for security guard training on their own and go, oh, yeah, Pat's not kidding. Like, he's actually there. Pat, how did you do that? And I was like, well, just read the whole journal of everything I taught. And in that journal, or in that sort of series, of course, like step 3 was like, go download go get hosting somewhere. Like, here's my link for that. It's an affiliate link. If you go through that link, I'll get paid. And then all of a sudden the income was like climbing very fast on Smart Passive Income through my affiliate links. I wasn't even selling anything. I was just giving all that information away for free. But through that information, there were opportunities to generate income through affiliate marketing. And I was like, wow, that's neat. I maybe should share the tools I was using, like the keyword research tools. Like, and then I did a webinar and a tutorial about how I use that, all free. And then boom, like thousands of dollars a month was coming in because I've sent so many people into that same tool. So I started to discover this amazing business model using affiliate marketing. The issue with affiliate marketing, though, is it's other people's products, and at any moment in time, they could, leave or change it or do something, and that's scary to build a business on the back of somebody else's thing. So, 2017, I started to create my own online courses about podcasting, email marketing, affiliate marketing, all those kinds of things. And then more recently, we've been promoting and really putting our resources into community, because it's now not just about the information. In fact, information is free almost everywhere now. We're suffering from too much information, in fact. So how do you differentiate? How do you actually help people now? It's the accountability, it's the community, the people. It's like going to the gym with other people versus doing it by yourself. And that's where we're at today. And the projects that I also have going on under the hood, I co-invented a physical product in 2019 just for fun to see how that went. And we launched it on Kickstarter. It's called the Switch Pod. It's actually a mobile tripod, and it launched to $418,000 in 60 days, which was incredible. And then now this Pokemon channel, which started because my kids were into Pokemon, and I was like, hey, I like doing things with you guys. Like, what is this Pokemon thing about? And then I ended up like diving headfirst into the deep end in it. And now I have my own channel that's generating actually more profit than my other businesses. And I have an event happening now, and I'm partnering with other companies. I'm even advising a company in the card collectible space now.
Wow.
It's absolutely wild. There's a lot we could talk about, but that's how we got here.
Dude, it's so amazing to hear that journey, because it seems like, oh, you know what? I'm just going to give this a try. And then it becomes this successful thing, right? It's almost like you lead by curiosity. Is it safe 100%. To say that?
That's a great way to phrase it, and if I'm not curious about it, I'm not going to do the work to figure it out, right? I have to be genuinely curious about something. But then I'm also like, oh, I'm finding out all this stuff about this thing I'm experimenting with. Like, I have to share it now, right? And that's like part 2 of it.
Yeah, no, for sure. And obviously, there are so many people. As I hear your story directly from your mouth, I feel like there's so many people now that have learned from you, and then they've begun teaching it, and hopefully they're doing it to that, that level before they begin to teach it. And that's a whole different conversation of the coaching space right now.
Right.
But, as I see what you've built and continue to, tell us a little bit about some of the pitfalls, right? We've just heard all the successes, but what have been some of the, I was curious about this, and it all fell apart, right? To kind of humanize this experience for people as they're listening.
Great lead into that, because it's really important to show that it's not always rainbows and unicorns, and it hasn't been. There was a time in mid 2010 / 2011 where a couple buddies of mine who also had websites, teaching business, they developed WordPress plugins. WordPress is a blogging platform. There are many free plugins. Many people create premium plugins that you could charge to give people access to. And they had audiences that were smaller than mine. And they each launched, they didn't know each other. They just so happened to both be doing this, like a similar thing at the same time. They weren't competing against each other, but they each made over $100,000 in a week from their launches for their plugins. And they were just like, yeah, we built it and just send a couple emails out and bam, money. And of course, my eyes were like money signs popping out, right? Like in the cartoons, because I was like, whoa, I have an audience 5 times bigger than you guys. I teach building businesses online. If I just come up with an idea for a WordPress plugin, everybody uses WordPress, like, cha-ching. So I immediately went to Google. I was like, WordPress developer. And I found one. It was like the first search. Like, again, you can already start seeing red flags in this story because I'm just jumping the gun on everything, not even doing research. Yeah. And so I have an idea in my head because I'm like, oh, I think my audience would love this. And I share it with them. And a project that was supposed to take $6,000 in 6 weeks ended up taking 6 months and like $15,000, because mostly I just wasn't very clear and understanding of what was trying to be built. I was just like, make it do this. And they're like, well, there's more to that than like, well, how do you want this to look? I'm like, I don't care, just make it. And again, it's just red flags everywhere. And eventually I get a working plugin at the end that does something with like a contact form and connects to your email. Like, I'm not going to go into the description of what it did, but I shared it with some of my colleagues at that point, because I was like, guys, I'm working on this secret project. Like, I'm not going to tell you yet. I'll tell you when it's ready. And it was like that for 6 months, all this hyping up of it, right? And then I share it, and they're just like, meh, like, okay, like that's kind of cool. And I'm like, what are you talking about? This is amazing, right? And they're like, yeah, but like this other tool kind of does that already. But what if it did this? And what if it did this? And like this would be cooler if it did this. And I'm like, I don't have any more money to spend to make it do these other things. And so the lessons learned there were, number one, every time I chase money first, it always fails, right? There was zero care for, well, what does the audience actually need? And that's lesson number two. Let's start with, well, what does the audience want, or what are their challenges, or what are their problems? Let's build for that, if and only if there is something to be built there. And that led to me writing my first book, which is called Will It Fly, which is test your business ideas so you don't waste your time and money. That's the tagline of it, essentially. So that was a very expensive lesson, but definitely one of those moments where I wish I had done something differently, or just knew better. But it becomes a great story I can tell that teaches others, so that perhaps you don't make the same mistakes. And the other part about this is, if you're developing software of any kind, like, you need to like share with the developer, especially if it's somebody that you hire overseas, there might be a little bit of a language barrier. Like, draw everything, every part of every button and what it does, or else they're just going to fill in those gaps and it's not going to work out. So I learned a lot about working with developers there as well. And then following that up, I took a lot of those lessons, and I did discover there was a problem in the podcasting space with people who had multiple shows and multiple podcasts that weren't able to display them on their website well. So I hired a developer who knew podcasts, number one, to develop what we called the Smart Podcast Player, and it allowed a person to display all their podcasts and have tags and connections between them for a person on their website. And I built that because I needed it myself. And then eventually people were like, can I have that too? And that became a WordPress plugin that did do very well. And that business, now known as Fusebox.fm, still is running today, and it's serving thousands of customers. And people like John Lee Dumas to Tony Robbins use that player on their website now. And I don't know if I would have done that if I didn't have those mistakes made at first, that's the cool thing about failing. It's not true failing unless you just give up or turn the other way. It's okay, well, what happened here? What can I do better next time? And just let's not do that again.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's the entrepreneurial secret, right? When you fail, you learn from it and you fail forward, to use a cheesy term, you fail forward into the next potential thing, right? A lot of times your failures show you, A, what you should have done differently, but B, more along the lines of like, what does your audience want? Now, what I heard as you were telling that story of like, I kept it a secret for 6 months, I released it. Then all my buddies went, no, over here, you should have did this or add this or do this. And to me, that speaks to community, right? And where you're pivoting now is the importance of community. I have my own community called Growth Now Community. I think that it's something that is so important to be able to bounce your ideas off of, hold people accountable, do all these things. If you had that community then that could have said, hey, try this before you spent the money, you would have been in a much different place. And obviously this is why you're pivoting into building your own communities. When did you notice the importance of that?
So, and you and I spoke about this before we hit record. I ran an event in 2019 called FlynnCon, and I brought all of my audience is known as Team Flynn. They're on like Team Flynn. I'm the team captain, but we're on the same game, and we're trying to win together. But sometimes we lose together. Anyway, 500 entrepreneurs flew to San Diego and hung out for 2.5 days, and it was an amazing experience. Right, we had all these incredible speakers and these activities, and spent lots of money to make it an amazing event. And we ran a survey at the end, as you should. And we were like, tell me in your words, like, what was the best part of the event for you? And almost everybody was like, all the stuff that happened in between all the talks, like meeting people in the hallways and just being able to meet people like me, find people who like, I found my people here. It's just like, oh, we could have just like rented the space and had no programming, and it would have been just as valuable, if not more valuable. So that taught me a lot. Like, wow, people really do crave these connections to each other. But of course, that was only 500 people out of the hundreds of thousands on my email list that would have that opportunity, because it's expensive and it's at a certain time of the year and not everybody is able to travel, et cetera. So it's like, wow, okay. And then we had the idea to eventually get to the point where after a few years of this event, we would create like an online version and have this incredible community virtually. Well, then 2020 happened. My event got postponed and eventually just canceled after 2021 when it wasn't able to happen again. But in 2020, we were like, wow, okay, now more than ever, people are craving community because we can't even go outside anymore. So why don't we move this project that was going to happen probably in 2023 to now? And so we just went all hands on deck on creating a community. We use a tool called Circle. I'm an advisor for that company now. This is like a community that lives on our own controlled platform, not on Facebook or LinkedIn or whatever. So we can control that experience and have a much more tight knit group. And we launched that in the summer of 2020. We had 500 people come in, paying members to come in and join the community, you know, and it's not about content. In fact, we just made sure that it wasn't about content with another pre-launch survey that said, well, in this community, what do you want more than anything? Nobody said content. Nobody wanted more content. And I think this is like a running theme of this conversation today. But we launched it and it was just so incredible because over time, people started to make connections with each other. They started to form their own little masterminds without us having to like even do anything. We just facilitated sometimes bringing experts in. We facilitated areas to have different discussions about certain things. We did challenges, which did very well to help hold people accountable for certain growth goals. And eventually just started to have a heartbeat of its own and be promoted from within. People were inviting people in to apply and get into SPI Pro. But most of all, it's provided the best feedback from anything I've ever created, right? Like people would buy my online courses about podcasting and like, hey, this is great. Like I actually finished and I got my podcast up and running. This is awesome. Thank you. But like what people are saying about SPI Pro, it's like, it's unmatched as far as like the response that people had. So we were like, wow, okay. And fast forward to 2022, you know, we were still selling courses and the course sales were going down and we were investigating. And we see that going everywhere. Like people are struggling today to sell like we did back in 2019, 2020. And it's like, well, maybe it's because they don't want more information anymore, right? Like they want the information, but mostly they want the goal, like the goal of not just having a podcast, but like having the audience built and what a person needs is not just the information. They need some accountability and for people to get there. So we just recently launched, like within the last 2 weeks, in fact, from this recording, something we're now calling the All Access Pass. You know, it's very common for a creator who has multiple courses, and we have several, like over 10, to just say, like, hey, everybody, like you can get access to all of our courses. It's Cyber Monday. Like you could pay, you know, a couple $1,000, you'll save some money and you get access to all the courses instead of just like the one or two. And we didn't want to go that route because again, that would be a disservice to the audience. Here's more stuff to confuse you and overwhelm you and show how far behind you are, right? That's not what we wanted. But we knew that different people are in different places in their business, and some people might prefer, you know, course number 3, or some people might start at course number 8. Some people might need the ones right at the beginning. So we developed this programming called the All Access Pass, where yes, you do get access to all of our courses and all of our workshops, but don't go into all of them. Start here. If you're, for example, a beginner, start with Smart from Scratch. You get through that course. After you finish that one, move on to build your own brand so you could build your website and get your social media handles created and figure out that. Once you finish that, move on to email marketing magic so you can start building your list. And then from there, you have a decision. Do you want to grow your audience even more, or do you want to begin to monetize? Well, depending on which path you want to go down, take that course. So we have these like different things that people can get access to, but we call them pathways now. You choose a pathway and then you go down that route, and it's a smaller monthly fee to stay involved in this. And for our business, this is great because this is the first time we're getting recurring revenue into the business, versus like, oh, we have to like launch this podcasting course and make a bunch of sales, or else like, well, we might have to let people go or whatever. Versus, oh, we have a predictable amount of people who are in here. When we promote, we get a predictable amount of people coming in, which then in the lifetime of that customer will actually be worth more than a one-time payment now. And so this is great because we can actually, the barrier to entry into what we have available is lower, and it's just more obvious. It's, you can get the one-time course for a much higher price on your own, and you're kind of like, you know, good luck. Or you can get access to all of our stuff, but you have a guide. You actually can get access to our team, and you also now have a community going through the same courses with you. And it's like the difference between going to the gym just by yourself and paying for, you know, a fitness package and you're kind of on your own, versus small monthly fee. you're here. We want you to show up, and you're here with other people in the same room, and we're sweating together, and hopefully getting to the goals together too. So this is big. We're trying to take a lead in the space of entrepreneurship and entrepreneurial education. Um, it was a very hard process to get to a point where we found something that worked. We hired for this. We spent a lot of money trying to research and do all this right, and we think we landed on it because we launched with a goal of 300 people getting into all access in December of 2022. And we currently have like 425 already in it, and there's still a couple weeks left. So
Wow.
I'm feeling really good.
No, that's awesome, man. Congratulations on the success or the success with that. And
Thank
obviously,
you.
I think the approach makes sense. And not only is it like going to the gym and you have the accountability buddies and you're sweating together, it's almost like you have that personal trainer, right? To pick a course, right? If I had a
Yep.
personal trainer, this is where I start, then I got to go here, then I go over here, and then I go over here, right? Just like if they were to come in there one step at a time. So I usually do this at the end of the interview, but let's do it now. How do people grab some of that information? Where do they
Oh,
get more? What's all that
bro,
stuff?
thank you for that. I'm not here to pitch your audience, but if you are interested in it, smartpassiveincome.com/all access if you want to check that out. And I love that analogy of the personal trainer because it's like you go in and a good personal trainer will say, hey, like, what are your goals? What do you want to do? I want to run a marathon. Awesome. Don't get into the weight room, right? It's like, let's work on endurance, and here are the things for you to work on your endurance because that's what you want and that's where you're at, right? Versus somebody who is strength training, it's like, okay, like get off the treadmill. We're going to do deadlifts right now, and like that kind of thing. So
Yeah, that's awesome. So obviously I want to talk podcasting a little bit.
sure.
Whenever somebody says, what do you do? I always say I'm a podcaster, even though it's expanded into speaking and hosting events and all
Mhm.
the things in between. But I always say I'm a podcaster. And I imagine you still live there as well, right? Doing it for as long as you've done. So what do you feel are the top three things in podcasting that podcasters benefit from that people don't realize, right? Here's the reality of podcasting.
Yeah.
80% of shows do less than 100 downloads an episode. People think they're going to make money off of advertising, right? Not most people don't. Some people do. Very few do. So I want to go outside of that box. What do you think the top
Yeah.
three wins in podcasting are that people don't realize?
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned the stats, and the stats are like that because people think it's easy. They just go in and they're like, "Oh, I just want to get rich off of podcasting," and it's like, "Oh, this actually requires work and thought and skill." It doesn't mean you have to start with skill. You can start from nothing, like many people do, but they figure it out as they go along. Now, to answer your question, there are three things that come to mind in terms of like why should I even care about podcasting? Number one, I want you to consider the consumption behavior of people who are watching video and or reading blog posts, right? Especially video today, where it's like 5-second, 15-second videos are optimal. It's like our attention spans are so short right now with video that it's very difficult to keep a person watching. If you have a person watching a video for 5 minutes, you're doing really well, especially on YouTube. That's like really good data. You're holding people for 5 minutes. That's amazing. That on a podcast would be that's unheard of, right? Because a podcast, when you look at the data, when people start listening, if you have a good hook and they are listening to these stories that you're telling or the interview, I mean, people are listening. Think about your own podcast consumption behavior. You're listening for 20 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour at a time. There is no other medium that allows for this much time with your audience. And that's a huge reason to love podcasting, right? That is the benefit of it, really. And the pro with podcasting versus like the con with podcasting that maybe YouTube is better for example, is, well, you have an algorithm that can help you get discovered much easier versus a podcast. You do have to work on relationships. And that's number two, relationships that you create with people you're speaking to, like you and me today, Justin. We're getting to know each other, and now we can take this relationship and move forward however we choose to want to do that. And a lot of my best friends now and best partners in the space have been a result of an initial podcast interview, whether me on their show or me on their show or them on mine, right? And then like those that's incredible. And then those have turned into dollars in some cases. Those have turned into people who I now mastermind with on a weekly basis. Like so much value can come from that. And I think that people forget about how easy it is to just get on Zoom or get on Squadcast or wherever and have a chat with somebody because there's a podcast. It's very difficult to just do that without the podcast. It's like, hey, can I talk to you for 45 minutes? I know there's like, we're not going to, like, I just want to talk. Very unlikely that that's going to happen, especially if it's like an industry leader versus the fact that you have a podcast that is of value. That virtual stage that you have is of value to the other person you're speaking to. So it's more likely for them to give you that time. And especially with where podcasting now is, when anybody's launching a book or launching a new program, it's very common to go, okay, podcast tour. I want to get on as many podcasts as possible, and then you can build relationships from there, right? So that's number two. And number three, it is super evergreen. The shows that you create now become seeds that you plant that will grow into an amazing brand later. It doesn't happen right away, and this is why so many people start and then quit before 7 episodes. You got to stay here for the long game. And as you are staying here for the long game, you get to know who your audience is, understand the language that they respond to, look at your data to see which episodes retain people for longer and just do more of those, do less of the others. And over time, you're going to build this amazing relationship with your audience as well, because bonus number 4, and I said that already, podcasting is the best way to scale intimacy. And when you consider all the noise out there and everybody fighting for everybody else's attention, if you can hold a person for 20 minutes, 30 minutes on a show, and they're getting to hear you and your story and how much you care, and also your amazing questions and how you dig deeper, I mean, you can build super fans much, much faster this way. And the magic moment for a podcaster is, and this is what I think about when I'm recording an episode, especially in the beginning, like with the hook, it's like, I want a person to press play, to listen for 10, 15 seconds, and then go, yep, this is the one I'm listening to. They put it in their pocket and then they go on that run, or they put it down on the console and they go on that drive, right? Then you got them at that point. And it's like, wow, so many things can happen when you do that.
Dude, it's so true, and I can't agree more with every single thing that you said, and obviously there's more wins from it, right? From content creation and all the other things that you
Oh,
can
for
also
sure.
do from the podcast. But I think that you hit the nail on the head with all of those, and I always say, I the impact that I'm able to make, the relationships I'm able to build, and the networking possibilities, right? Like you said, how else can you get 45 minutes with somebody you admire, somebody you look up to, or hey, your potential perfect client? Like,
Yeah.
this is literally the only way, in my opinion, right now, that you can absolutely do that. So I love that you shared that. So if I did my research right, and I know you said you're a father of 2, if I'm correct, they're 12 and 9, correct?
12 and 10. Although in 3 days, my son turns 13. He's going to be a teenager in 3 days, dude.
Which is wild. So I am a
Super
bonus
wild.
dad of 2. They're 12 and 9.
Oh, nice.
So I haven't been there the whole time of their life. I've been there the last 4 years.
Yeah.
And I've learned so much from them, like and even more importantly, I've learned so much about myself. So there's kind of a 2-part question, but we'll start here. What have you learned in business that you've taken into parenting that you feel works, as far as whether it be connecting more with your kids or disciplining them or whatever? What have you learned in business that you've taken into parenting?
Oh, wow. There's so many. I mean, I'll give you 2. Number 1, I have to give myself permission to make mistakes. If you try to approach business with being perfect, you're never going to launch. And if you try to approach being perfect as a parent, you're also going to always feel like you're failing and that you're not good enough and you're comparing to others and all that kind of stuff. Probably the bigger thing that I've learned, that especially now that the kids are older and we can chat with them and have real conversations, like real life conversations with them, which is super fascinating, is like in the business world as a coach, a proper coach, like a legitimately valuable coach, does not tell you what to do. They help you discover what to do yourself. They ask questions, right, to help you determine what the next course of action should be. Yes, of course, advice is important, but those questions help you, sort of like Inception, like, oh, you discover it and then you're more likely to do it, and because you're the one that came up with it, essentially. Same thing with parenting. My wife and I both early on decided that we were not going to, unless it was like a clear, like, clean your room or something. But even then, it's like we ask questions instead, and we're coaches, right? So that we can have the kids decide on their own what they want to do, right? So just as an example, if their room is dirty, we might say like, hey, how does it feel to live in a dirty room? And it's a little bit of a backhand slap there as well, like a little passive aggressive, like, hey, how's it feel to live in a messy space? Oh, I'm fine. It's okay. Like I get by. Well, what happens? Do you think it's easier to find things if they're in their own place versus if they were just strewn about all over the floor and in the closet? Oh, well, it's obviously easier to find things if they're in the same spot. Do you think it's going to take a long time to do that? Yes. Well, what do you think would take longer? All the time that you would have trying to find everything when you don't know where it is, or just fixing things now and then knowing where everything is from this point forward? and then they get it, like that's maybe not the best example, but you see how I'm like, some people might call this manipulation, but at the same time, it's like you as the parent know what should happen. You have to use strategies like this sometimes, not to manipulate, but to help them self-discover. That's what the whole purpose of this is. And then from that point forward, you just continue to, you're not going to get it to where a point where it's like, okay, from that point forward, now their rooms are forever going to be clean. No, but the more you help them discover that that's the right thing to do, then the more likely it is they're going to have that skill for life, right? It's not just about cleaning the room because a friend's coming over today. It's about helping them self-discover from within so that when they're 30 and they have a guest over their house, they're going to have a nice space to invite those people into and just generally be a good citizen, right? So that's kind of our approach to parenting, and I pulled that from the business sector for sure.
No, I love it too, because that stops them from going, why? Right. You sometimes when you tell them to do something, they go, well, why do I have to do that? Right. They're
Yeah,
essentially answering that question before they ever get to
exactly.
asking that question. I'm stealing some of those tidbits as well to just, take them down that road and have allowing them to guide themselves. So I like that. But
Yeah.
let me flip that around. What have you learned in parenting or as a parent that you've taken into business that's helped you over there?
So when I was a brand new parent with Keone, my son, 12, almost 13 years ago, I remember there was at one point, I think we were 6 months into a lack of sleep and just terrible dieting and all this kind of stuff because we were just trying to figure it out. I remember going up the stairs, and we only have like 12 steps in our home to get to our second floor. But I was holding my son, and I got up to the top of the steps, and I was like out of breath. I was like, oh my gosh, like what the heck is happening to me? Oh, I didn't take care of myself. What's going to happen when Keone's 3 and he wants to play soccer? Like, I'm just going to be sitting on the side because I ran out of breath. Like, no, I don't want that to happen. I have to be taking care of myself in order to best take care of him. And so that's when I got really focused on my body and my energy levels and what I was eating, how much physical work was I doing to stay, fit as possible. I wasn't trying to get ripped or anything, but I just wanted to be healthy enough to focus and be there both mentally and physically with my kids. And so taking that into business, I've realized the same thing happens whenever I get on an amazing run of just really taking care of myself and my body. And I'm not always in the right position. I fall off the wagon sometimes, but I always try to get back on. But I always notice that when I work on what I eat and how physical I am in my personal life, my business feels that much more exciting. It's so much easier to be more creative. I have more energy to podcast. I have more energy to get behind the camera. And I also, as a byproduct, feel like I look better behind the camera when I'm in that sort of mode. So, it's like the analogy of, when you're on an airplane and they're like, hey, you got to put the mask on yourself first, then put it on others. I need to do that in both areas of life because that is going to allow me to better serve those who I want to serve, especially my family. Um, and initially it was like, oh, that's selfish. Like, no, I can't cook a nice dinner. Like, I'll just eat Taco Bell because it's fast and then I can take care of the kids. But eventually it would get to the point where either my stomach explodes or I'm in the hospital or, I burn out or whatever. And then I wouldn't even be able to help anybody. Right now, people are taking care of me. So that was a big realization early on in parenthood.
No, that's awesome, man. So I want to ask you a question that I ask every single person on my show. Obviously, I've had the opportunity to interview some of the most successful people on the planet. So I want to ask you a two-part question. The first part is, what is your definition of success? The second part of that question is, what are 3 things you do every single day to ensure that success for yourself?
Hmm. My definition of success is to be able to do or have the ability to, as much as possible, do what I want, when I want, with who I want. And typically the with who I want is like with my family or friends. And to be able to build a business, for example, as that mechanism to enable myself to have and do what I want and when I want, right? Having that freedom, right? Like I have turned down several business opportunities that would have made me very successful on paper, CEO of multi-million dollar companies, but I would have been in an office all day wearing a suit most likely and traveling around the world, which sounds exciting, but then it's like, well, the thing that's most important to me, my family, is going to be left out of that equation. That's not success to me, right? So I think a lot of success has to come from the inside. A lot of us define success compared to like by comparing ourselves to what others are doing. And it's like, that's them. Like they're on a different timeline. You can get inspired by them, but oftentimes looking at that just makes you feel less of a success. I think we have to define what success, and this is why I love this question, is means to you. It's different for everybody, but to me, it's that freedom, and that's the most important thing. Now, the way that I get there is to number one, I do journaling every day. I write in what's called the 5 minute journal. I start the day by writing down 3 things that I hope to accomplish today, and one thing I'm grateful for. And then I end the day with essentially 3 things that I wish I had done better, and then also one thing that went really, really well. And I just practice that every single day. And it allows me to have a really nice, start of the day, things to be grateful for. No matter what happens, I have these. I'm so excited about it. And I'm on my way to success or have success. And then at the end of the day, just continuing to keep that going over time. So that's number one. Number two, I've, in a similar way, I have been really focusing lately on creating space, especially as new and more businesses happen, more business opportunities happen. If I say yes to every single opportunity, I'm not creating any space anymore. I'm just filling in more space. And it's the funny thing about productivity. A lot of times we work on these productivity skills. We read all the books, we have all the apps to get time back, only to then fill it up with more stuff that makes us busy again. And for me, I'm trying very difficult, but I'm trying to get that extra time back and just be okay with the fact that that's empty space. Like I can use that time to just relax or breathe. Or lately, I've been going fishing, and fishing has become my new sort of meditation, getting out behind the screen and into nature and on the water, and the devices are off, and I'm just like in hyper focus and flow, and it just like gives me new life to come back into work later and into life later to just go even harder when I need to. So that's number two, and then number three, building an amazing team. As a business owner, it's important to realize that eventually you get to the point where you either have to stop growing or you keep growing, but you burn out, or you keep growing or you have help. And the help that I have with my team, especially my now CEO, like I've stepped down as CEO for my company, SPI Media, to allow him to come in because he's more the operations person and he's able to project manage and put all these things together. And then I'm at a point now where I feel like I'm just the talent now, which is cool. They need me to write an email. I'll write an email. They need me to come on the podcast, or the podcast is obviously kind of more automated. But if they need me to create a video for something, then they put it into my Monday.com, and then boom, there it is. So it's just very nice now that I've brought people on to create even more space for me. So yeah, I think maybe the big lesson there is the 3 things is just like I am okay not trying to build $100 million company, right? Like that's not important to me. What's important to me is to be healthy and to be happy and to be with my family and to provide for my team and to serve my audience. And I don't need $100 million company to be able to do that. But I do need space to be my best version of myself to then better serve others.
That's awesome. So I wrap up every single interview with the same question, but before we get there, we already shared where people can go and join your communities. How else can people follow you, get your information, learn more from you? What's all the good stuff?
Yeah, thanks, man. I appreciate it, Justin. So at Pat Flynn on most social media channels, Instagram, Twitter, I would love to say hi. And again, smartpassiveincome.com, that root domain will show you kind of all the things that we're working on. And that includes the All Access Pass and our podcast and all the kinds of things. So that would be it. And then for those of you who are curious about the Pokemon thing, which I know we didn't get into, but
Oh yeah, we totally skipped that. We'll have to have
no,
you back
that's
on.
fine.
We'll do a whole episode on Pokemon YouTube channel.
It's been a fun case study. I have been sharing openly, as I always do, like how this came about on Smart Passive Income, so you could check out those episodes. But Deep Pocket Monster, because Pokemon is short for Pocket Monster, on YouTube, and we are very close to crossing 500 million subscribers, and we have this amazing community running an event. It's just wild. Like this is I'm feeling like a kid, and bringing people along the ride.
Dude, that's awesome. And I love that it started with like something your kids were into.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
and you've been able to grow this really, really cool thing. So that's really, really awesome. So like I said, I wrap up every single interview with the same question. Since the show is called The Growth Now Movement, that question is, in your life, what has been your biggest moment of growth?
There was a specific moment that comes to mind going back to when I was laid off. That was tough for me. And then I started this business and it started going well. And then a year later, the boss who let me go calls me. And he had no idea what I was doing in the business space. But he calls me and he sounds very like worried about the call because he was the one to sort of let me go and he was just checking up on me. But he was like, "Hey, Pat, like, how are you?" And I said, "Wow, actually, things are going pretty okay." And he's like, "Well, I'm sorry for what we had to do, but it was just the circumstances of the time. And I like this guy actually removed himself from the company as well, on his own will to create a new company. And so he pitched me. He said, Pat, I started a new company. I'd love to have you come and work for me. We would be continuing the same projects that you are already familiar with. And a few of your best friends from work who you used to chat with are there already. And we're waiting for you. In fact, I'm going to pay for you for a whole year to live rent free uh, up where we're at." And it didn't take me less than 2.5 seconds to say thanks, but no thanks. And then he was just like, "What?" And I told him what was going on, and he's like, "Wow, I'm very proud of you. Like, go for it. Like, I know you do well." So it was interesting. It was almost like I was still holding on to this thing about our architecture. I went to school for 5 years for that, and I was like the analogy is like if I was climbing the corporate ladder, right? And then all of a sudden there's this new ladder next to me. It's the business ladder. And I'm looking up and I'm like, wow, that ladder is way higher. Like I can go a lot higher and farther with that. But I'm still holding on, like one foot is still on the old ladder. It just felt like that because I was still, in fact, looking at architecture jobs around the space because that's what
Sure.
my brain was like. This is what you were meant to do. You went to school for this. Like, don't like I have this sunk cost fallacy where it's like, well, you have to use what you learned about in school or else that was a waste. But then it was after that call that I took my leg off that corporate ladder and I was fully free to go up the business ladder, the entrepreneurial ladder at that point. And that was a life defining growth moment because in order to grow, you have to let go.
I love it, man. Pat, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your wisdom and journey and, continuously inspiring others to really pursue their dreams. Cause that's the end of the day when you break down what you do for others, you inspire them to truly let go of the ladder, go pursue their dreams and build the life that they want, man. So thank you so much for doing that and being that person in the world.
Thanks, man. I appreciate you. Thank you, everybody.